At 76, Richard Gere remains the very definition of a Hollywood heartthrob. That sly smile, those bedroom eyes, and the effortless charm that never needed a script to land still define him decades later. For generations of moviegoers, Gere wasn't just an actor, he was the fantasy itself. The dangerous drifter in American Gigolo, the irresistible tycoon in Pretty Woman, the smooth-talking lawyer in Chicago. On screen, women fell into his arms as if pulled by gravity. Off screen, few ever doubted the effect was much the same. Time may have softened his hairline, but it never dulled the magnetism. In a recent sit-down interview, Gere was asked a question. Most actors would skillfully dodge, deflect, or laugh away. Instead, he leaned back, flashed the unmistakable grin, and decided to tell the truth. Who were the women he secretly wanted? Not polite crushes, not passing admiration, but the ones who lived in his imagination. The ones he dreamed about, but never had. Rather than play coy, Gere embraced the moment. "You want the truth?" he teased. "I'll give you the truth." Then came the confession. 6 women, 6 actresses who, in his words, could have had him any day, anytime, no questions asked. He spoke with humor, and a dangerous sparkle in his eye that suggested even at 76, the fantasies hadn't faded. Some were co-stars whose chemistry with him crackled so intensely it nearly burned through the celluloid. Others were legends of his generation, women he never quite crossed paths with in the right way, but always wanted to. "I'm not talking about crushes," Gere clarified, his voice low. "I'm talking about the kind of women you'd risk being caught for. The kind who make you think that if the door ever shut behind you, you wouldn't come out until you'd burned every calorie you had." 6 names, 6 stories. 6 confessions from a man who built a career on desire and even now isn't afraid to admit just how many times he wanted to make fantasy real. The first name came easily, Julia Roberts. The smile, the hair, the spark that turned Pretty Woman into a modern fairy tale and made Richard Gere the most envied bleeding man on the planet. When her name was mentioned, he shook his head slowly, as if the memory itself carried danger. "Julia Roberts," he said, savoring every syllable. If people thought there was heat on screen, they should have felt what was happening between takes. Audiences saw Edward and Vivian fall in love under Hollywood lights, but Gere admitted there were moments when fantasy bled into reality. Julia laughed in a way that made you forget the cameras were there. She'd touch his arm, look at him with those wide, expressive eyes, and suddenly acting stopped feeling like acting. You were just a man trying not to lose yourself. The chemistry was instant and undeniable, the kind you don't manufacture. From day one, it was electric, he confessed. The kind where you think, "God help me if we're ever left alone too long." With a low chuckle, he admitted that if she'd ever crooked a finger back then, the crew would have been waiting a long time for them to return to set. It wasn't just her beauty, though he never denied it. Julia was luminous, fearless, funny, and effortlessly seductive without trying to be. "People always ask if anything happened," he said. "What happened is I spent months wondering what it would have been like if the cameras weren't rolling, and I wanted it bad." Next came Diane Lane, the forbidden flame who nearly burned down the screen with him in Unfaithful. Gere's eyes lit up instantly. "Diane Lane," he said with a laugh that carried admiration and regret in equal measure. "Now there's a woman who could undo you with just a glance." The film was about betrayal and temptation, but for him, the danger wasn't confined to the script. Diane's sensuality was natural and unforced, the kind that thickened the air when she entered a room. She could smile just slightly, and suddenly you felt it in your chest. Gere admitted there were moments when filming became a challenge, not because the scenes were uncomfortable, but because the chemistry was too real. Lines blurred, imagination took over. She'd lean in to whisper a line, he recalled, and "I think if she moves 1 inch closer, we're going to have to stop filming for entirely different reasons." She made him nervous in a way that rarely happened, not because he didn't know his craft, but because he couldn't stop thinking about what might happen if the cameras disappeared. If Diane Lane had ever decided to blur the line, he said plainly, I wouldn't have said no. I would have thanked her. Michelle Pfeiffer followed, the blonde enigma, ice and fire wrapped in one impossibly elegant package. Gere grinned like a man confessing a secret sin. Michelle Pfeiffer, he said softly. She was trouble. From Scarface to The Fabulous. Baker Boys, her allure was legendary, and Gere admitted he often watched her work with a kind of fascinated hunger. She didn't need to rush or exaggerate. One look from Michelle and you were already halfway gone. She could peel you apart with her eyes, he said. On set, people spoke about her in hushed tones, always with reverence, always with a hint of fear. Cool on the surface, fire just beneath. Gere laughed as he admitted that if she'd ever leaned across a table, brushed his hand and invited him away, he'd have followed without hesitation. It wasn't just lust, he explained. It was fascination. Michelle was sharp, intelligent, and dangerous in the best way. The kind of woman who made you think that if she ever truly let you in, you'd never be the same again. When asked if he ever told her how he felt, Gere just smirked. No, he said. But women like Michelle always know. Then came Susan. Sarandon, the rebel queen. Fiery, unapologetic, and fearless. Gere's smile turned wolfish at the sound of her name. Susan Sarandon, he said, his voice dropping. She wasn't just sexy, she was fearless, and that's deadly. Her magnetism wasn't delicate or distant. It dared you to come closer. Susan looked at you like she already knew what you were thinking and didn't judge you for it. She invited it. Gere recalled the first time he saw her in person, the unmistakable charge in the air. She tossed her hair, smirked, and suddenly polite thoughts evaporated. If Susan had ever asked me to sneak away, he admitted, time, place, none of it would have mattered. What made her irresistible wasn't just her body or wit, but the danger of her confidence. She wasn't afraid of anything, especially not desire. When teased about whether he could have handled her, Gere laughed. You don't handle Susan Sarandon, he said. You surrender. And I would have. Sharon Stone came next, the ice. Queen, the femme fatale who could cross her legs on screen and stop the world from breathing. Gere let out a low whistle. Sharon Stone, he said, shaking his head. Pure danger. She didn't play seductive, she weaponized it. Bold. Intelligent and unflinching, she could strip you bare with a single look. Gere remembered being around her at industry events, feeling that voltage in the air. It wasn't just beauty, it was power. If Sharon had ever whispered my name in a quiet corner, he admitted, I'd have followed her anywhere. I wouldn't have cared who saw. What made her unforgettable was the balance, sharp brilliance paired with brazen confidence. She could cut you down with a line and pull you back in with a smile. When asked if he'd have risked scandal for her, Gere didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat, he said. She was worth it. The final name carried a different weight. Sophia Loren, the goddess of Rome. When her name was spoken, Gere's grin softened, but the desire didn't fade. Sophia? He said reverently. She wasn't just an actress. She was an event. Her beauty wasn't something you observed. It pulled you in. Gere admitted that even after he became a star himself, Sophia remained his ultimate fantasy. At Hollywood functions filled with legends, she could enter a room and make every other woman disappear. It wasn't fair, he said. She had that much power, and he didn't hold back. If Sophia had ever whispered his name, he said, he'd have run through fire or glass, anything she asked. What captivated him was the combination of warmth and iron strength, safety and danger intertwined. That, he said, shaking his head, is the deadliest combination there is. He laughed softly at the memory. People say she was untouchable. But if she'd ever let me touch her even once, he paused, eyes gleaming. Hollywood wouldn't have been ready for what came next.